Hello everyone, welcome back to our second week of online Science Project 1 lesson. Before we start with lesson 2, let's have a short review of lesson 1. Last week, I discussed with you the four types of science projects. Do you remember the four types of science projects? Number 1, experimental or investigatory projects. In these types of projects, out of curiosity, the students do the experiments. So they start with a hypothesis and they use the scientific method in doing this type of projects. Number 2, engineering projects, also known as technology projects. Now, these types of projects start with a design of a machine or mechanical structure with the purpose of improving strength or performance. So, it is in this project that the students create a machine that is able to do something, or they create a machine to improve the performance of the material or the machinery. Number 3, display projects. I mentioned in the last lesson that display projects are the easiest projects to make. Why? Because it is in these types of projects that you make a model of the concepts you have learned in science, like making a model of the solar system, the body systems, and the plants and animal cells. Number 4, theoretical projects. What are theoretical projects? Do you remember what theoretical projects are? Well, theoretical projects may involve the same format as experimental or engineering projects. However, for several possible reasons, such as lack of feasibility due to cost, the actual experiment is not performed. Okay, number 4, theoretical projects are the types of projects that are not continued. Why? Because the materials are expensive or the materials for the projects are not available. So in number 4, the projects are not completed. Okay, so this was our lesson last week. Our lesson for today is about the content of Science Project Book Report. If you remember last week, I mentioned that the Science Project Book Report is one of the requirements of this subject. Now, the Science Project Book Report has 5 main chapters. For today, we're going to look at the first two parts. The first part, which is the abstract, and the second part, which is actually chapter 1, is the overview. Now, what is the abstract and what is the overview of the Science Project Book Report? Before we start with the lesson, what are the objectives of the lesson? At the end of the lesson, you should be able to, number 1, write the abstract of the science project. Number 2, state the purpose of the science project. And number 3, identify the independent, dependent, and control variables of the science project. These are the objectives of the lesson, which are expected from you at the end of this lesson. Now, what are the parts of a science report book? First, let's look at the abstract. What do you know about the abstract? Have you written an abstract of a story before in English? What about in science? The abstract contains the purpose or objective of doing the project. Why are you doing the project? What's the reason why you are doing the project? Now, an abstract is a concise summary of an experiment or research paper. And this part should be brief, typically under 200 words. So the abstract is the part of the science book report that when a person reads the abstract, the person already knew the content of the science book report. The purpose of the abstract is to summarize the research paper by stating the purpose of the research, the experimental method, the findings, and the conclusion. Well, do you know how to write an abstract? It's not actually easy to write the abstract of a science project. However, here is a good format for you to follow in order when writing an informational abstract. Each section of the following 5 factors below can be written in a sentence or 2 long sentences. For the first one is the motivation or purpose. State why the subject is important or why anyone should care about the experiment and its results. So this is the first part that you can write in your abstract. What is your motivation in doing the science project? What is your purpose? Why have you chosen this project? So this is very important. You have to write down your motivation or your purpose, why you have selected the science project, and why should anyone care about your experiment or its result. The second part is the problem. State the hypothesis of the experiment or describe the problem you are trying to solve. What is the problem of your science project? What is it that you are trying to solve in your science project? So that is the second content of your abstract. The third part is the method. How are you going to solve the problem? Well, method is actually connected to the second part, which is the problem. So you have the problem, how are you going to solve it? So you solve the problem by using the third part, which is the method. How did you test the hypothesis or try to solve the problem? So you have to specify how your problem is solved in number 3, which is the method. Number 4, results. What was the outcome of the study? Did you support or reject a hypothesis? Did you solve a problem? How close were the results to what you expected? State specific numbers. Now, in number 4, you have to specify the outcome of your experiment. What was the result of your experiment? So you have to include it also in the abstract. For the last part, which is the conclusions, what is the significance of your findings? What is the relevance of your project, your discovery? What was its relevance to the current situation? So, do the results lead to an increase in knowledge, a solution that may be applied to other problems, etc.? So these 5 can be the content of your abstract. Now, each part can be written in only one sentence, or you can also write 2 long sentences with these factors. Number 1, again, is the motivation or the purpose. Number 2, the problem of your science project. Number 3 is the method that you use in solving the problem. And number 4, the results. Now, the results basically came from what you have observed from doing the method in your science project. And then number 5 is the conclusion. Now, what are the parts of a science report book? The first chapter is the overview. The overview has several parts. However, today we are going to tackle only the 2 parts of the overview. The first part is the purpose. Now, what is the purpose of your science project? So the purpose contains a specific and brief description of the project. If you remember, the purpose is also a part of your abstract. So in chapter 1 overview, you can restate or you can rewrite the purpose of your science project from your abstract. It states the general principle being studied and any specific results to be obtained. That is the purpose. The purpose of an experiment is to test out your hypothesis. If your hypothesis is correct, then it is a theory that could work every single time the experiment has been performed by a scientist. So basically, the purpose of your experiment is to test the hypothesis, is to test the problem of your science project. Now, a part of the overview are the variables. Do you know what variables are? Well, most of my students could not tell the difference among these three types of variables: the independent variable, dependent variable, and control variable. Most of my students, they struggle with these types of variables. They couldn't actually tell the difference among these three. Now, what is an independent variable? So the definition of independent variable is variable the experimenter manipulates or changes. So it's a part of the experiment that the experimenter or the scientist is changing. That is the independent variable. What about the dependent variable? Well, the dependent variable is the variable the experimenter measures after making changes to the independent variable. Now, these variables are used by scientists to figure out how the natural world works. In doing so, they use experiments to search for cause and effect relationships. The cause and effect relationships explain why things happen and allow you to reliably predict what will happen if you do something. In other words, scientists design an experiment so they can observe or measure if changes to one thing cause something else to vary in a repeatable way. Now, the independent the independent variable is the one that is changed by the scientist. That is the independent variable. Now, why only one? Well, the reason is that if you will change more than one, then it would be hard to figure out which change is causing what you observe. So in your experiment, the independent variable should be one only. Again, the independent variable is the variable the experimenter manipulates or changes. And the dependent variable is what the experimenter measures based on the change of the independent variable. So independent variable and dependent variable, they are directly related with each other. Why? A change in independent variable will cause a change in dependent variable. So if you change something from the independent variable, then the dependent variable will also change. Take a look at the dependent variable. It should be measurable. So when you say measurable, it indicates using numbers. The third type of variable is the control variable or the constant, or it is not tested but used for comparison. So the control variable is constant. It doesn't change. What is it in your experiment that you do not change? Okay, what is it in your experiment that you do not change? So these are the three types of variables, and I will be showing you two videos for you to understand more the difference among these three types of variables. So from the video that I will show you, you will be able to easily identify the independent variable, dependent variable, and control variable. So the independent variable is the one that is changed by the scientists, as I mentioned earlier, and it should only be one. So the dependent variables are the things that the scientist focuses his or her observations. So the scientist will be focusing on the dependent variables. The dependent variables will have changes based on a change in the independent variables. And number three, control variables. They are quantities that a scientist wants to remain constant, or she or he must observe them as carefully as the dependent variables. For this video regarding the walking water experiment, you will have an idea of the three types of variables. Now, I want you to look at the video carefully and understand the explanation that is shown by this video.
Welcome to Moo Moo Math in Science. In this video, we will use the experiment walking water in order to learn about variables found in an experiment. In most experiments, you will find at least three variables: the independent variable, the dependent variable, and the control or constant variables. Let's take a look at walking water and see if we can't learn about these three types of variables. This is walking water, and what I thought I would do is it's a good way to learn the variables of an experiment, and we'll learn about independent, dependent, and constant variables. Sometimes they're called control variables. So here's let me set up what we have. We have cups of water. We have water, 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 water. I went ahead and used this type of food coloring, and as you can see, I have green, red, blue, yellow. Now, what we're going to do in order to introduce the independent and dependent variable is that we're going to have two types of water. We're going to have fresh water in the front, and in the back we're going to have salt water, and I'm just going to put some salt in it. So in an experiment, you have an independent and dependent variable. The independent variable is what you are changing or manipulating. And in this demonstration or experiment, you will be changing or manipulating the type of water. You will have fresh water and salt water. Also, notice that I'm putting the same amount of salt in each cup. Okay, so let me quickly do that, and then I'll show you how we're going to set up the walking water portion of this. You get a paper towel like this. You fold 1, 2, 3 times. You then fold it like this. You place one in this cup, one in the other, and then I've pre-folded some, and then I will continue doing that. Now let's take a look at what I have. I have a folded paper towel in between each of the cups. Okay, I have fresh water in the front, and I will mark the salt water by placing the salt by it. I have folded paper towel in each one of these. Okay, let's take a look at it a little bit closer. Okay, get a little idea what it's like. So now what we will do is let it sit and soak for a while. Probably will soak for a couple of hours, and then we will be able to measure the amount of water in each one of these cups, and that will be our dependent variable. And we'll see, does fresh water, is it absorbed more quickly than salt water? So let's see what happens. Okay, so 4 hours later, here's what we have, and as you can see, the water has moved from one side to another, and now all of the cups are filled up. So now I need to get an idea of which one is more efficient, the fresh water or the salt water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a scale, and I can get the mass of the fresh water and the salt water, and that will tell me which one transferred more efficiently. So, in summary, the independent variable is the variable that can stand alone. It is the variable that you are changing. In walking water, you change the different types of water, either fresh or salt water. The dependent variable depends on the independent variable, and you measure this variable. You measure the amount of water that walked or traveled into the empty cup. That would be your dependent variable. And you had several constant or control variables. You used the same type of cup. You had the same amount of water, the same paper towels, etc.
From the walking water experiment, which you have just watched, can you tell again the different variables, independent, dependent, and control variables? From the walking water experiment, the independent variables are the type of water, fresh and salt water. For the dependent variables, it's the amount of water that traveled or walked into the empty cups. And the control variables, the types of cups, same amount of water, and same type of paper towel. These are the three types of variables from the walking water experiment which we have watched. I want you to look at another video which will help you understand the three types of variables better. So watch carefully and write down notes regarding the three types of variables.
To explain these variables, there's a very simple experiment I like to demonstrate. Firstly, let's say that this is a running track, and we have our runner here, and he's going to run 100 meters. But each time he runs it, he's going to wear a different type of shoe. So we've got runners, casual shoes, and boots. And this is the thing that's going to change each time he runs this 100 meters. And this is called our independent variable. That's the thing that we're going to change each time he runs this experiment. So let's put his runners on first. We start the timer, he runs his 100 meters. We stop the timer, and he got a time of 27.3 seconds. And this is the thing that we're measuring. The thing that we're measuring in the experiment is called our dependent variable. It depends on our independent variable. He got a time of 27.3 seconds with his runners. We reset him back to the start. We put his casual shoes on. We start the timer. He runs the 100 meters. And this time, he got a time of 30.2 seconds. So a little bit slower this time. We take him back to the start. We put his boots on. We start the timer. He runs the 100 meters. We stop the timer. And this time, he got a time of 33.3 seconds, which was his slowest time. So we can say that he runs the fastest with his runners, followed by his casual shoes, and then he runs the slowest in his boots. But that's not everything to this experiment. There's a few other things that we need to consider. The first thing to consider is the weather. We need to make sure that the weather was kept the same each time he ran the 100 meters. If it was sunny when he was wearing his runners, but if it was raining when he wore the other shoes, that's not really a fair comparison because the weather could have had an impact on his ability to run. The clothing that he was wearing is also something that we need to consider. We need to make sure that he was wearing the same clothes every time he ran this 100 meters. If he was wearing running gear, wearing his runners, he had to be wearing running gear for the other ones as well. Otherwise, his clothing could have affected his time. Same with the surface. If he was running on concrete or wood or grass, we need to make sure that that was the same every time he ran this 100 meters so that any difference in time was mainly just due to the shoes that he was wearing. That's what we're trying to achieve, an accurate and fair comparison between the types of shoes. Because these are the things that we're trying to control in this experiment, we call them controlled variables. And that's it for today's lesson. I hope you learned something. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more of these videos, and I will see you next time.
All right, so from this experiment, I hope you can identify easily what an independent, dependent, and control variables are. So let us look again at the different variables shown by this video. What are the independent variables in the video? The type of shoes. So the type of shoes, runners, casual shoes, and the boots. What about the dependent variables? The dependent variables in the video is the time, which we saw from the timer. The timer is used to tell us the time that the runner took when he ran the 100-meter running track. What about the control variables in the experiment or in the previous video? Now, there are actually 4 control variables in the video that we have just seen. The running track, which is 100-meter long. The runner is the same runner. And the clothing he was wearing should be the same, okay? The weather should also be the same. So these are the control variables that were kept the same throughout the experiment. For your classwork, I would like you to write down the abstract, purpose, and the variables of the following video about erosion and soil using the Google form that is uploaded in my Google Classroom. Here's the video about erosion and...
Hi, I'm Jared. Welcome to Fun Science Demos. The big idea today is erosion and how water has the power to shape our land. But we don't want the water to shape our land too much because we need that soil to grow plants. We use those plants for food, and animals use those plants for food. So what you see in front of me are 3 different types of land. This first type is just bare soil. It's just soil. This next type has dead leaves on top, and the third type has plants growing in the soil. This may not look too exciting right now, but when it rains, that water has the power to change the land, and we're going to make it rain to see what that water is going to do to our land. So we cut the top off of 3 plastic bottles, and we put the same soil in each of those 3 bottles. All of these bottles have the same soil. We covered this soil with dead leaves, and we grew some plants in this bottle. We've also used other plastic bottles to catch the water that's going to come out of these when we pour it into the bottle. We want to pour water into each bottle and see what happens. Does that water have the power to change the land? What do you think's going to happen when we pour water into this bottle and it comes out into the cup? Will it be any different from the water we pour into this bottle as it comes into the cup? And will this one be any different when we pour water into this bottle and it comes out into this cup? So I'm going to slowly pour water in. You're going to see the water level rise, and we'll see what happens with our soil. We'll keep it coming. And now it's coming out. Take a look at the bottle we used to catch the water. Well, what do you notice? Well, it's cloudy. So why is it cloudy? That's because all the dirt and the soil from our bottle was washed into the cup. The water had the power to actually take the dirt and the soil with it out of the bottle and into the cup. The water moved the soil. It shaped the soil. So now I'm going to pour about the same amount of water into the next bottle. What do you think is going to happen? The water that we catch, will it be just as dirty? Will it be less dirty? Will we even be able to see a difference? Well, let's pour the water and find out. Here we go. So I'm pouring the water in. Making it rain. adding water to our bottle. I can see the leaves floating to the top. Do we have any overflow? Yes, we do. Stop the rain and see what we have. So we've zoomed in so you can compare the two. This one has a lot of the soil in the container. This one just has a little bit of the particles, a little bit of the soil in that water. So why do you think this container is a little bit cleaner? Well, what's different between the two? Well, this one had leaves, dead leaves on top, and I think most of these dead leaves helped protect the soil underneath from moving with the water. So what do you think is going to happen with our third container? We have plants growing in the soil. What's going to happen when we add water and make it rain in this container? All right, here we go. Let's add the water. About the same amount. Pouring the water in. What do you think's going to happen here? Add a little bit more. It's coming out. We're going to stop pouring and see if we can compare what we see coming out. The water coming out of this container looks a whole lot cleaner than this one and a little bit cleaner than this one. So the question is why? Why is this water cleaner? I poured about the same amount of water into each container of soil. This one looks really clean. Well, to answer the question why, we have to zoom in and take a closer look at what's really going on here. So now we're all set to take a closer look at why the water coming out of this bottle was so clean and clear compared to the others. To do that, I'm going to actually lift these plants out of this bottle and let's see what happens. Well, what I notice right away is what comes along with all of the plants. Well, the soil is actually coming out too. When I flip it over, I think you'll be able to see why. So we've zoomed in so we can see what's going on here. Why is this soil staying together? Why is it staying in place? Well, you can see the roots from our plants grew into the soil. And almost like little fingers, those roots are holding the soil together. So when it rains, the roots keep the soil from washing away. The roots of the plant, that's what keeps the water from eroding the soil. Besides holding the soil together and in place, roots do another amazing thing. To show you that, I'm going to squeeze this and I want you to watch what happens. Where did all that water come from? Well, that came from when we made it rain on our soil. The roots of the plants helped hold that water in. Plant roots actually go deep into the soil, and this model is going to help us see how deep they can go. We're going to zoom in and see if we can see those really tiny plant roots that we have growing in our soil. We've zoomed in now so you can see these tiny roots in action. I'm going to point them out, and they actually extend from the plant all the way down to the bottom of our soil. I'll point out some of the bigger ones. They grow down into the soil. And think about what they're doing. They're holding that soil in place. All of these tiny roots getting nutrients from the soil, but they're also helping the soil out. Plants do an amazing job at keeping erosion from washing away too much soil. We need that soil. We depend on that soil to grow plants, and animals depend on that soil to grow plants. If you want to learn more about plants and soil and erosion, check out our links in the video description. Science is so cool, and sometimes it's dirty. Thanks for watching.
For your classwork, make sure that you write down the abstract, the purpose, and the variables of the video which you have just watched. See you again next time.